AITA for asking for a divorce after my wife took a 1-month trial with her lover? My name is Liam. I am 31 years old, and until recently, I thought my life was all mapped out. I have always been a pretty simple guy. No grand ambitions, no fake drama. I have a steady job as a software developer, a decent house in a quiet neighborhood, and until not too long ago, I thought I had a solid marriage with a woman I truly loved. Jenna and I met about 8 years ago, and looking back, it feels like another lifetime. I was 23. I had just gotten out of college. I was working at my first job, and honestly, I was pretty lost in life. She was 22 and working as an assistant in a marketing agency while still trying to find her calling. For the record, she never really found it and ended up becoming a stay-at-home wife. We met at a barbecue hosted by a mutual friend, one of those casual backyard things where everyone walks around holding a paper plate and someone always ends up burning the burgers. She was the one who came up to me, cracking a sarcastic joke about my face looking like I was plotting an escape plan. I don't even remember my response, but she laughed, and we ended up talking for the rest of the evening. Things moved fast from there. We started dating, and I felt like she added a spark to my otherwise mundane and predictable life. Jenna was adventurous and spontaneous, always planning last-minute road trips or dragging me out to try a new restaurant she had heard about. On my end, I was the down-to-earth one. I was the one who checked the budget, the weather, or the gas gauge before we left. It worked, or at least it felt like it did. We complemented each other. She brought excitement into my life, and I gave her a stability she said she hadn't had in her past relationships. 3 years into our relationship, we decided to get married. The wedding was small, just family and a few close friends. Neither of us came from a wealthy family, so there were no grand ballrooms or fancy caterers. But that didn't matter. After the wedding, we started building a life together. We bought a small 2-bedroom house in a quiet suburb, not the fanciest place, but it had potential. Most of the time, everything seemed stable. I would go to work, come home, and Jenna was usually in the kitchen or slouched on the couch, glued to her phone. She would tell me about her day. She was working in marketing at the time, so there were always stories about clients or coworkers, and I would listen. That was our dynamic. She was the talker, the one who always had stories, and I was the listener. We didn't have kids, but that was a mutual decision. Jenna wasn't in a rush, and honestly, neither was I. We wanted to wait until we were more financially stable and truly ready for that big step. I felt like we were on the same page, but looking back, I wonder if I settled too much into my routine. It's easy to fall into a habit, especially when life seems quiet. I would get up, go to work, come home, and do it all over again. We did have our date nights, usually a dinner at one of our favorite restaurants or a trip to the movies. But I eventually stopped noticing the little things, like the fact that Jenna seemed to feed off the attention of others. It wasn't a flaw, not at first anyway. She is the kind of person who lights up a room and naturally draws people in. I think I ended up taking it for granted, thinking her energy and warmth were just part of our life together. At that point, I wasn't worried. I thought we were solid. Sure, we argued sometimes. What couple doesn't? Most of the time, it was over trivial things. Me forgetting to take out the trash or her leaving her shoes lying around everywhere. Nothing serious. But here's the thing with relationships. They can look perfect on the surface while cracks quietly form underneath. And if you don't pay attention, those cracks can grow until they weaken the entire foundation. I didn't see it coming. Not back then, anyway. I thought we were building something solid. Something that would last, but sometimes life has a way of showing you just how wrong you were. 2 years ago, a new character appeared in our lives. Cody. Cody moved into the house next door after the previous couple, who were a bit older, moved to Florida. He was about 28 at the time, younger than most of the neighbors. He was a personal trainer, fit, confident, and frankly a little too good-looking for his own good. He had the kind of physique that turns heads, like he had just stepped out of an action movie. As soon as he moved in, Cody was impossible to ignore. Not just because of his looks, but also because he was always outside doing something. Washing his car, mowing the lawn, setting up a pull-up bar in his backyard. He always had a reason to be shirtless. Very quickly, he became the talk of the neighborhood. Jenna noticed him immediately. How could she not? The first time we officially met Cody, he came over to introduce himself while we were in our backyard on a Saturday morning. He was nice, the kind of guy who could charm anyone. Jenna struck up a conversation almost instantly, asking him where he was from, what he did for a living, and how he liked the area. I remember just standing there, smiling and nodding, barely getting a word in while they chatted like old friends. At the time, I didn't see any harm in it. Jenna was sociable. She talked to everyone. She could be just as chatty with the mailman or the guy at the hardware store. I didn't think there was anything special about her interest in Cody, but looking back, I can see the little changes that followed. It started with harmless conversations. Whenever Cody was outside, Jenna found an excuse to go out too. At first, it was for little things. Getting the mail, watering the plants, taking out the trash. But somehow, these quick chores always turned into 10 or 15-minute chats with Cody. One day, I came home from work and found them talking in the driveway. Jenna was holding a laundry basket she was taking to the garage, and Cody was leaning against his car, hanging on her every word. When I pulled up, they turned to me, and Jenna acted like nothing was going on. Cody was just telling me about his new workout gear, she told me, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. But it didn't stop there. A few weeks later, Jenna started baking cookies, which she hadn't done in months. I didn't think much of it until I saw her walking across the lawn with a plate in her hand. Just being nice to the neighbor, she said when I asked her about it. I shrugged. It wasn't unusual for her to do that sort of thing. She had brought brownies to other neighbors before. But then, she bought a new workout outfit, a tight, colorful set. Not her usual style at all. I asked her why, and she replied that she was thinking about getting back into jogging. You know, to get back in shape, she said. I didn't dig any deeper. Jenna had gone through fitness phases before, where she would get motivated for a month or two before giving up. But this time, the timing was convenient. You see, Cody went for a jog almost every morning. I would see him running through the neighborhood with his earbuds in. And coincidentally, Jenna decided her new running routine would start at the exact same time as his. One morning, I even caught them talking on the sidewalk as I was leaving for work. Jenna was stretching, and Cody was showing her some kind of technique to prevent shin splints. I didn't say anything. I just gave a little wave and drove off. But something about that scene stuck in my mind. It was around that time I started noticing that Jenna's phone habits were changing too. She had always been glued to her phone, scrolling through social media, texting her friends, but now she seemed more defensive. There were several times I walked into a room, and she quickly locked her screen or flipped her phone over, as if she didn't want me to see what was on it. One evening, I saw her scrolling through Instagram, and when I glanced over, I spotted Cody's name right at the top of the screen. She quickly swiped away, but I had enough time to see she was looking at his profile. When I asked her about it, she brushed it off. I was just looking at his fitness posts, she told me. He has good workout tips. I wanted to believe her, so I let it slide, but the little details kept piling up. Another time, I was tinkering in the garage when I heard laughing coming from the backyard. I went out and saw Jenna and Cody standing by the fence, laughing about God knows what. Jenna was holding a glass of iced tea, and Cody was gesturing animatedly while telling a story. When Jenna saw me, she waved as if nothing were amiss. Cody was just telling me a funny story that happened at his gym. She explained later when I asked her about it. It was starting to get weird. I don't want to sound paranoid, but you can feel when something is off. There was a new energy in the way Jenna talked about Cody. She would casually mention things he said or did. Like, Cody is thinking about getting a dog, or Cody recommended a great protein shake to me. It wasn't what she said, but the way she said it. And then there were the looks. You know those little stolen glances? When we were outside and Cody was around, I would catch Jenna shooting quick looks at him. It was subtle, but once you start noticing it, you can't ignore it anymore. At this point, I still hadn't said anything. A part of me didn't want to believe there was reason to worry. I trusted Jenna. We had been together for years, and I thought we had something solid. But another part of me, the one that couldn't ignore the pattern that was forming, was starting to doubt. I decided to keep quiet for the time being, but to stay observant. If something was going on, I needed to see it with my own eyes. It was a Saturday morning, and I remember it perfectly because it started out so normally. I woke up early as usual, made myself a cup of coffee, and sat at the kitchen table scrolling through the news on my phone. Jenna was still sleeping, which was nothing unusual. She liked to sleep in, especially on weekends. The house was quiet, just the sound of the coffee maker in the background. And for a moment, I felt relaxed. It's crazy how that works. You think everything is fine because you have no idea what's coming. Jenna walked into the kitchen about an hour later. She was in her pajamas, her hair still messy, her phone in one hand and the other rubbing her eyes. She sat down across from me at the table, and I saw right away that something was wrong. She radiated a palpable nervousness, tapping her finger on the table, stealing glances at her phone as if avoiding eye contact with me. "Are you okay?" I asked, putting my phone down. She gave a quick nod, then shook her head. "Actually, no," she said, letting out a deep sigh. "We need to talk." Anyone in a relationship knows those 4 words never mean anything good. My stomach tied itself in knots, but I tried to stay calm. "All right," I said, leaning back in my chair. "What's going on?" Jenna hesitated, her eyes scanning the room as if searching for the right words. Finally, she looked at me and said, "I don't know how to say this, so I'm just going to say it. I think I have feelings for Cody." For a second, I thought I had misheard. "What?" I asked, leaning forward as if getting closer would help me understand better. She bit her lip, visibly uncomfortable. "I didn't want this to happen," she quickly added, as if trying to defuse my reaction. "It just happened. I've been spending time with Cody, and I feel a connection, and now I'm lost." Lost. That word hit me harder than anything else. She didn't say she felt guilty or that it was a mistake. She said she was lost, as if it were a dilemma she had to solve. I stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. My mind was racing. Was she saying she wanted to leave? That she was asking for a divorce? That she was just trying to confess and move on? I had no idea, and that was even worse. "So what does this mean?" I finally asked. "Are you saying we're done?" Jenna shook her head vigorously. "No, not necessarily," she said. "I don't know what I want right now. I love you, Liam. I really do, but I can't stop thinking about him, and I need to figure out what these feelings mean." I felt like the ground was collapsing beneath my feet. We had been together for years. We had built a life. And here she was telling me she was no longer sure she wanted to be with me. It was unreal. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "So what are you saying? You want us to take a break?" She hesitated, then nodded slightly. "Yes," she said. "I need time to clear my head. I was thinking maybe I could take a month to spend time with Cody and see if there's something real between us. If it doesn't work out, then we can focus on us." I blinked, completely dumbfounded by her audacity. "Are you serious?" I said, not even phrasing it as a question. Jenna nodded, her eyes pleading. "I know it sounds crazy, but I don't want to throw away what we have without being sure. I don't want to live with regrets, you know?" "Regrets?" That word dug into my head like a splinter. She was talking about regrets as if she were the one taking all the risks, as if my feelings took a back seat to her need to find herself. I stared at her, torn between anger and disbelief. A part of me wanted to explode, to tell her how selfish she was, but another part of me, perhaps calmer, more calculating, decided to stay quiet and let her dig her own grave. "All right," I finally said, leaning back in my chair. Jenna blinked, surprised. "Wait, really?" "Sure," I said, shrugging as if it were no big deal. "If you think that's what you need, go ahead." Her expression shifted, as if she wasn't sure whether I was being serious or sarcastic. "I just think it's the best way to know where my heart is," she said cautiously. "Of course," I repeated. "Do what you have to do." Inside, I was already gone. The second she said she wanted to spend a month with another man, something clicked in my head, but I didn't want to show my cards just yet. If she was ready to throw away our marriage for a fantasy with the neighbor, I wanted to see how far she would go. Jenna breathed a sigh of relief, as if she had just been given permission to do something heroic. "Thank you," she said, reaching across the table to touch my hand. "I know it's a lot to ask, but I truly believe this is the right thing for us." I pulled my hand away, stood up, and grabbed my coffee mug. "Sure," I said once more, my tone flat. "If that's what you need." She didn't say anything after that. She just sat there, probably realizing that I wasn't fighting, that I wasn't protesting. But inside, I was already making my own plans. Over the next few days, Jenna started packing a small bag. She told me she was going to stay at Cody's, and she said it in such a casual tone, as if it were just an insignificant detour. She didn't even seem to notice that I wasn't asking questions and that I was putting up no resistance. The day Jenna left, the house had a different vibe. Not empty, exactly, but quieter, as if the volume of my life had been turned down. I stood in the living room after she walked out the door with her duffel bag over her shoulder, and I stared at the entryway. I thought I would feel angry or heartbroken, but all I felt was a strange calm, as if the burden of pretending everything was fine had finally lifted from my shoulders. I went into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and stood there, trying to process what had just happened. My wife, the woman I had been with for years, the woman I thought I would grow old with, had just left to think things over with the guy next door. If this hadn't been my life, I would have thought it was a ridiculous TV show plot. The first few days were strange. I started noticing the little things she had left behind. Her favorite mug on the counter, a pair of shoes by the door, a blanket tossed over the back of the couch. I thought about putting them away, but ultimately I left them there. Not because I missed her, but because I didn't want to expend the energy on it. I threw myself into work, taking on extra projects to fill my time. I stayed late at the office, not out of necessity, but because I didn't want to go home to an empty house. When I wasn't working, I hit the gym hard. I wasn't a regular, but there was something satisfying about pushing my physical limits, as if I could sweat out all the frustration I was feeling. My friends started noticing that something was off. Some asked why Jenna was never around, and I gave vague answers. She's staying with a friend for a bit. I wasn't ready to tell the real story. My dad was the only one I told the truth to. I called him a few days after Jenna left, and the first thing he said to me was, "What's wrong?" He always had a knack for reading me, even over the phone. When I explained it to him, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then he said, "Well, son, I hate to say it, but you're probably better off without her." At first, I didn't know what to say. I expected him to be more upset or to ask me more questions. But then he added something that stuck with me. "If she doesn't know your worth, why should you wait around for her to figure it out?" He was right. I had spent so much time trying to understand Jenna's decision, trying to figure out what I might have done wrong, that I hadn't taken the time to think about what I deserved. I wasn't just a backup option for her, someone to come back to if her fling with Cody didn't work out. That night, sitting in the pitch-dark living room, I stared at the wedding photo on the mantel. We looked so happy in that picture, so sure of our future. But now, it was nothing more than a reminder of everything that had gone wrong. By the end of the week, my mind was made up. I wasn't going to wait for Jenna to choose. I was going to choose for myself. The next day, I called a divorce lawyer. Sitting in that office was surreal. I explained the situation, trying to keep my voice steady, even though a part of me still couldn't believe it was real. The lawyer listened carefully, nodding, and when I finished, he said, "You are completely within your rights to file for divorce. This kind of situation falls under irreconcilable differences." Hearing those words clicked something into place in my mind. Irreconcilable differences. That was what we had become. Jenna and I were no longer on the same page, and maybe we never had been. The lawyer walked me through the process, explained what I needed to do and what to expect. Leaving his office, I felt a strange sense of relief, as if I were finally taking back control of my life. Back home, I started making small preparations. I transferred money into a separate account in case things turned nasty. I walked through the house, mentally dividing what was mine and what was hers. I didn't touch her belongings yet. I wanted to wait until it was official, but in my head, I was already picturing the house without her. Days turned into weeks, and I got used to the silence. It wasn't as awful as I had thought. In fact, it was quite peaceful. I no longer had to put up with Jenna's constant chatter, nor the petty arguments over trivial things like whose turn it was to do the dishes. Meanwhile, I was hearing things from the neighbors. One told me they had seen Jenna and Cody at the park, looking cozy. Another had run into them at a coffee shop downtown. I nodded, feigning indifference, but deep down, I felt a mix of anger and pity. Anger because she had sacrificed everything for a fling that likely had no future. Pity because I knew it would end badly for her. Cody had never struck me as the settling down type, and Jenna was going to find that out the hard way. By the third week, I had stopped checking my phone hoping to hear from her. I figured if she wanted to talk, she would, but I wasn't holding my breath anymore. I was done waiting. One evening, while cleaning out the garage, I came across a box of old photos from our early days. For a moment, I felt a twinge in my heart as I remembered our past happiness. But then I thought about all the red flags I had ignored over the years, all the times I had put her needs before my own without even realizing it. I closed the box and shoved it aside. I didn't need those memories. Almost a month to the day after she left, Jenna made her grand return. I hadn't heard much from her during her little trial period with Cody. The few texts she had sent me were vague at best. Hope you're doing well, or we'll talk when I get back. She hadn't even tried to give regular updates or pretend to be torn. It was as if she had already relegated me to the role of Plan B. At this point, I couldn't care less. I wasn't waiting for her to come back. I wasn't wondering what they were doing together. I had already initiated the divorce proceedings, and my lawyer was drawing up the papers. As far as I was concerned, the marriage was over. But I hadn't told her, not yet. When she walked through the door, to her, it was as if nothing had changed. She had her bag slung over her shoulder, her hair perfectly styled, and this confident look on her face, as if she were returning from vacation and expected me to roll out the red carpet for her. "Hey," she said, dropping her bag by the door. "I'm back." I was sitting on the couch, flipping through channels, and barely looked up. "Welcome back," I said in a neutral tone. She paused, as if expecting more of a reaction. Faced with my indifference, she walked over and sat on the arm of the couch. "We need to talk," she said in a soft, cautious voice. I muted the TV and turned to her. "All right," I said, crossing my arms. "Talk." Jenna smiled, that smile she used when she wanted to smooth things over. "I've been thinking a lot," she began, "and I've realized some things about myself, about us, about what I want." I simply nodded, waiting for her to continue. She took a deep breath, as if about to deliver a solemn speech. "I care about you, Liam, I really do, and I think we can get through this. I think we can rebuild what we had." "Rebuild?" She said the word as if it were just a matter of fixing a leaky faucet. I didn't answer, just staring at her, letting her fill the silence. A little unsettled, she continued. "Cody is a good guy," she said, and I almost had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing at how casually she brought him up. But I realized he's not what I need. He's fun, sure, but he's immature. He doesn't have your stability, and I think I just got caught up in the excitement of the moment. There was her grand revelation. She had tested out the new toy and decided the old one suited her better. "Yeah," I replied calmly. Jenna blinked, as if waiting for more of a reaction. "I know I hurt you," she said, placing her hand on my arm. "But I truly believe we can overcome this. We've been through so much together. Liam, we have a history. That's not something you just throw away." I let her finish, let her pour out all those carefully rehearsed lines about love, forgiveness, and fresh starts. When she was done, I stood up, walked over to the kitchen counter, opened a drawer, pulled out the stack of divorce papers my lawyer had sent, and set them down in front of her. "What is this?" she asked, her smile fading. "Divorce papers," I replied simply. Her face went pale. "Are you joking?" she said with a nervous laugh. "No," I replied, leaning against the counter, arms crossed. "I'm not joking." She stared at the papers for a long moment in disbelief, then looked up at me, eyes wide. "You're divorcing me?" "Yes," I said in a steady voice. "I'm not interested in being your second choice, Jenna." Her expression went from shock to anger in an instant. "Second choice?" she spat. "That's not it at all. I was lost, Liam. I needed time to figure things out. And in that process, you decided to go test the waters with another man," I replied calmly. "You left, you walked out on our marriage, and now you're coming back because it didn't work out with him. Do you really think I'm going to welcome you back as if nothing happened?" Jenna opened her mouth to argue, then closed it, her face turning crimson. "It's not like that," she said, her voice trembling. "I was trying to do the right thing. I didn't want to stay and end up resenting you. You thought you could have it both ways," I finished for her. She stood up, crossing her arms. "You're making a mistake, Liam. We can fix this, I know it." "No," I replied firmly. "We can't. You made your choice, and now I'm making mine." She looked on the verge of tears, but I didn't let myself be moved. I had already made my decision. The rest of the conversation passed in a blur. She tried to argue, to guilt-trip me, to bring up our history, our house, even the idea of having kids someday, but nothing worked. Finally, she left the house, slamming the door behind her. I stood for a moment, staring at the empty spot where she had been standing, and I felt nothing. No sadness, no regrets, no doubt, just relief. Later that night, I called my lawyer to tell him Jenna had seen the papers. "How did she take it?" he asked. "Very well," I replied, suppressing a smile. Do you want to give her some time to process it, or do we move forward? We move forward, I said without hesitation. It hadn't been easy standing up to her, but deep down, it was the right thing to do. She had treated me like an option, like a backup plan in case her fling failed. And if she thought I was going to accept that, then she didn't know me as well as she thought. I knew she wouldn't let it go easily. Jenna wasn't the type to give up a fight, especially not one she felt she was losing. Barely had I sat down when my phone buzzed. A text from her. This isn't over. I stared at the screen for a few seconds before locking the phone and tossing it onto the couch. She was right. It wasn't over, not yet, but it would be soon. The following days were chaotic, to say the least. Jenna showed up unannounced the next evening, banging on the door as if she wanted to break it down. Liam, open the door, she yelled. I opened it, keeping my expression neutral. What do you want, Jenna? She pushed past me, storming into the living room as if she still lived there. We need to talk, she said, pacing back and forth. You can't file for divorce without giving me a chance to fix things. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. You had your chance, I replied calmly. You made your decision when you left. That's not fair, she shot back, her voice rising a notch. I didn't leave to end our marriage. I left to think, to make sure I wasn't making a mistake by staying. I let out a dry laugh. And by doing so, you proved that you didn't value what we had. You don't test a marriage by going somewhere else, Jenna. It doesn't work that way. She stopped, her eyes red with frustration. I was lost, she said in a broken voice. I didn't know what I wanted, but now I do. I want us, Liam. I want to fix this. Too late, I replied in a firm tone. You can't come back now just because it didn't work out with Cody. Her face twisted with anger, and she pointed a finger at me. You're being petty, she snapped. You're destroying everything we built over one mistake. I shook my head, keeping my cool. It wasn't just a simple mistake, Jenna. It was a series of choices. You chose to flirt with Cody. You chose to put your feelings for him ahead of our marriage. And then, you chose to leave. Those weren't accidents, they were decisions. She opened her mouth to protest, then gave up, her shoulders slumping. For the first time, she looked defeated. What am I supposed to do now? She asked weakly. I sighed, feeling a slight twinge of pity. Regardless, that's not my problem anymore, I replied. You made your choices. Now, you have to live with the consequences. She stood there for another minute, hesitating as if to say something else, but finally, she walked out without a word. The divorce proceedings moved quickly after that. Jenna initially tried to stall, no doubt hoping I would change my mind. She even went so far as to play the victim with our mutual friends, telling them I was being cold and ruthless. My dad, on the other hand, was entirely on my side. When I brought him up to speed on the situation, he let out a low whistle. She's got nerve, he said. But I'm proud of you, son. Holding your ground isn't easy, but it's the right thing to do. Jenna's attempts to buy time didn't get her very far. My lawyer was formidable, and the evidence of her leaving for Cody made things pretty straightforward. She tried to claim alimony, asserting that she had sacrificed her career for the marriage, but the judge didn't buy it. In the end, we reached a fair settlement. She got a small sum of money and a few pieces of furniture she had picked out, but I kept the house and the bulk of my savings. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than I expected. The final hearing was bittersweet. Sitting in that courtroom, signing the papers that would officially end our marriage, felt surreal. I glanced at Jenna a few times. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept in days. Her lawyer handed her a pen, and for a moment, I thought she wasn't going to sign. But finally, she scribbled her name at the bottom of the page, sealing the deal. After the hearing, she approached me in the hallway. Liam, she said softly, her voice barely audible. I'm sorry for everything. I looked at her, trying to see the person I had fallen in love with all those years ago. But all I saw was someone I used to know. I know you are, I replied, but apologies don't fix this. Her eyes filled with tears, and she reached out as if to hug me, but I stepped back. Take care of yourself, Jenna, I said, turning and walking away. From time to time, I would hear about Jenna through acquaintances. Cody had apparently moved on to someone else shortly after she came crawling back to me. She was now living with a relative, trying to figure out her next steps, as a mutual friend told me. I took no satisfaction in hearing about her struggles, but I didn't feel sorry for her either. She had made her choices, and now she was living with the consequences. One day, I ran into her at the grocery store. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second, and I could read the guilt written all over her face. She gave me an awkward little wave, but I just nodded before walking past her. There was nothing left to say. Looking back, I don't regret the way I handled things. Jenna thought she could have it all, that she could leave, explore her feelings for someone else, and come back to me when it didn't work out. But life doesn't work that way. I learned a lot about myself through this process. I know now that I deserve someone who values me, someone who doesn't treat me as a fallback plan. And if that person is out there, great. If not, that's okay too. For now, I'm just focusing on rebuilding my life my own way. Jenna's trial run with Cody might have been her way of seeking clarity, but for me, it was the wake-up call I didn't know I needed. Comment. What I hope you take from this is the quiet power of self-respect. Your value is never up for debate, and you should never have to audition for a place in your own life. Setting a boundary isn't an act of anger. It's an act of clarity about what you will and will not accept. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is walk away from a situation that compromises your peace. True healing starts the moment you decide your well-being is more important than anyone else's apology. It's about taking responsibility for your own happiness. The goal is never revenge. It's reaching a place of quiet strength and inner calm. Remember that you are the author of your own story, and you always hold the pen. I hope you always choose the path that leads to your own peace and dignity. If you like the stories, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.